Welcome back, Rebels.
Hello.
So we've got a special one for you this week. This is part 2 of Adam on David, David on Adam, which sounds like a wonderful movie.
Oh, it's not one I want to watch. Thank you very much.
But yeah, today I'm going to be interviewing David, as heavily requested by you guys. How are you feeling about this, David?
I feel very nervous, actually. This is, I don't know, I feel pressure to deliver value, to be a good interviewee. I know I'm a good interviewer.
Yeah, you've done enough of that. But you've also done a lot of interviews on other people's podcasts as well.
It's true, but I do feel more pressure because it's our show and it's you. And I just, I want it to be good.
So we're going to start off with, I sent you over a list of questions beforehand, but I'm going to start off with one that's not actually on this list. So I just thought of it last night and I was like, actually, this is something I've known you for 10 years and I don't actually know the answer to this question. So I know how you first started doing graffiti, but what was it that first got you into art? Like, do you remember that, like, being a kid and like being like, okay, creativity is the one, art's what I want to do?
That is a good question. So I would say as a kid, I didn't know that art was what I wanted to do. I was always interested in it, but I never showed any sort of like quote unquote natural talent, which I have a whole thing about, but because I don't think anyone has natural talent, but it wasn't something that I was like throwing myself into. It was something that I did sporadically because I really enjoyed it. But I mean, I got a C for GCSE art. I was never like known as the arty one or whatever, and that came much later. But the moment specifically, I remember like really loving art-based activities was a colouring book that I had from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when I was probably like 5 or 6 years old, and actually Yona tracked down a copy of that colouring book, like with
amazing.
blank pages, and got it for me for Christmas, which is like really special. I loved cartoons, I loved Masters of the Universe, Star Wars, anything like that. I was always like drawing characters, but I think that the school system wasn't like telling me that there was anything that I could do with art. It wasn't saying that art was valuable in any sort of way. It was something that I did for fun and I enjoyed, but it was never seen as important, so it wasn't really something that I pursued. And then falling into graffiti, I was like 18 when I first started painting, and for like most graffiti artists, they probably get into it when they're like 13, 14. So I found it much later, but that's because it was very different then, and you had to be kind of invited in, you had to know someone to do it that way. So yeah, it wasn't until I was 18 that I started painting, and then that was when I was like really throwing myself into it, because I found a way of like, I always loved drawing on paper, but all of a sudden I can take these sketches on paper and I can magnify them 10 times on the wall, and that was really exciting for me. So that drove the kind of dedication towards it, realizing still at this point, still not thinking that it would be a career, still being told that it wasn't important, still being told that like this is not something that I should be doing, but none of that mattered because like just the passion for it was there.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was younger, it was like I was definitely drawing, I was definitely interested, but I hadn't fully gone down that route to like turn it into a passion.
Going back to the colouring book, what was it about that you enjoyed doing? Do you reckon that was, again, you were very young at the time, so this is a long time ago. What was it about that you think really drew you into it? Because obviously like a colouring book's an interesting one because you're not actually creating anything, but it's all process. Like it's all about just the doing. Do you think it was that doing that drew you to it over kind of actually doing something else?
I'd say it was probably flow state. I probably got into flow state as a 6-year-old and didn't realize what it was, but just spending hours and sort of although yeah, you've got the outlines there for you, I would like draw in the edges, I would add extra characters, and then you've got the whole creativity of like, it's a black and white page, you can use any color that you want, and that was exciting for me. So I think that, yeah, I think I probably was just getting into flow and just didn't realize it.
I think that's really interesting because obviously there's lots of like adult colouring books out there now, and I think for a lot of people who don't see themselves as creative and have never done something before, like I can now see a bit more benefit to those adult colouring books where it's like, actually someone could get into flow state and they might have never been in flow state before in like an entertaining way. They might have kind of done it at work, but it's interesting, yeah, how flow state can start.
100%. That's your entry point. I think that the adult colouring books are like really actually a really important thing for someone who's not been on that journey yet. That can be your first taste of, because it's an easy entry level, but you can do so much within those confines. And I think it's the flow state is the most important thing. Something that I'm always talking about with my videos. People look at my Instagram or my TikTok and they see a 10-second video of me putting together a painting, which takes me 7 hours. And it's like, there has to be more for me than the need to produce the content. It's like the actual I have to love the actual process, because I just wouldn't continue if I was going to be out there in the cold every day for 7 hours creating a painting, just to then put it into a 10-second form that's going to be on someone's feed for like 10 seconds and then they're going to scroll on. It's like that's not sustaining enough. It's like there has to be love within that process, within the actual making. Otherwise you're setting yourself up for failure.
I think that's definitely something that we should look into further, because just being able to trigger that, getting people into creativity, I think is a really important way to do it. So yes, if you know anyone out there who doesn't see themselves as creative and maybe wants to get started, maybe that colouring book could be that first little intro. So moving on now, I know like in your earlier life, you struggled with ME for like a number of years. What kind of positives did you take out of that? And did kind of art and creativity help you in any way?
That was probably the hardest point of my life, I would say. I was 17, where I've been diagnosed by different people. Some people said ME, some people said chronic fatigue syndrome. And I know that we've had listeners write to us who have struggled with similar, just kind of debilitating illnesses. And so for 5 years, I struggled with that, and I was sleeping in 18-hour blocks, be awake for like 5 or 6 hours and then go back to sleep for another 18 hours. And I think I probably had like quite a healthy dose of depression thrown into that. And that's only me looking back. Like during it, I didn't know what was illness, what was depression wasn't even a thing that I was thinking about, but reflecting on it, I think that was definitely present. And I think so much of that was coming from, like at 17, I'd not developed, 17 to 22, I'd not developed really any skills. Like I said, I wasn't seen as the creative one or the arty one. There was nothing, but I felt like I could do more. I felt that I could be more. Like I had this kind of like feeling inside me that like that was destined for something, but then not knowing what that is, sort of living with the limiting belief that there are extraordinary people and there are regular people, and feeling like I could be one of the extraordinary people, but there being no supporting evidence. I didn't have anyone telling me that. I didn't have any particular skill. I hadn't developed anything that would get me to that. And really the only things that I had in my life were, other than my parents who like looked after me for that 5-year period, which I will forever be grateful for. All I had was like a little part-time job at Virgin Megastores, which I would like, my mum would literally be shouting at me for hours beforehand to get me up to go to that job. And like so many times I'd call in sick or whatever, and they were like super supportive and helped me through it. And painting graffiti. And those were the only two sort of light points in my life at that time. So it was very difficult, and I like have so much empathy for anyone that is kind of stuck into that. I feel like if I'd had more hope during that time, then maybe I would have got over it quicker, because it was gradual routine that got me out of it. And I mean, even now, like, you know me, like I'll crash out sometimes, and sometimes I'll be like, right, I've got to go because I have to sleep within the next hour, otherwise I'm going to be fucked. And they say that kind of when you've recovered, that you're 70% of what you would have been. So there's always kind of that cloud over my head that I'll never be fully better, because I do get really tired. but I would say that I have this like identity that I've built around myself for hard work, and that I will outwork anyone. It's like so really interesting story that, I don't know, maybe makes me sound like a dick, but when we were, do you remember when we got that job at Saatchi Gallery? I think it was like a couple of years ago. You weren't
the big
on
one,
it.
the overnight one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I came the next morning to do.
You
the
came
morning
the next
shift.
morning. That's right. Yeah. So we threw like 20 artists at that. I think like basically we had
probably in total. Yeah,
we had these like huge walls of Saatchi Gallery that we had to cover top to bottom, and I was the first one there and the last one to leave, and I was the only person that like wasn't getting paid to do it, like other than like you and Yona, do you know what I mean, us that we're on a wage. Like and I outworked everyone, and that was a really interesting look for me at like all of our like freelance artists. And like, they don't get me wrong, they worked fucking hard, like everyone busted their ass on that job, like absolutely, but I outworked everyone, and it wasn't the money that was pushing me on, because I wasn't getting paid. It wasn't a freelance, like this was just, I'm on a salary. This was the job that's in front of me. And so that I think just speaks to my kind of need to always like be hardworking. And that was gradually how I got out of the funk of ME, was like, okay, there's like the one variable that I can do is I can work hard, and like maybe I'll have to like sleep it off afterwards, but I can work hard. And I just started to build that into my identity, but still very cloudy, because of culture and everything around me not telling me that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, or there was a way out. It's like, you're going to get over this whatever sleeping disease that you have to go into a 9-to-5 and live this kind of regular person life. That wasn't very exciting to me.
And if you go back now and speak to that kind of younger person of you who wasn't well at the time, what would you say to them? Is there anything you reckon you could have got yourself out of it quicker?
Yeah, man, I'd just go back and give them our podcast. Like, I'd just go, David, this is you in like, this is you in the future. At that point, it felt like so few people were capable of doing something amazing with their lives. And now it doesn't feel like that. Like every week we put out an episode with someone who is doing something amazing with their life. We have done, like, if you look back on the last 10 years, the places that we've gone, the people that we've seen, like, it just fills me with joy, like literally the stuff that we have been able to do. And I think that question of what would you tell your younger self is always the same. It really is like, don't worry, it'll work out. Because as soon it's like, it's like anything that we do now, we know it'll succeed or it'll fail, but like the success will be in the doing of it. I didn't know that then. All I saw was like people going, well, that won't work. And so that's really scary. So I would just be that one voice that would go like, no, fucking do it, because something will happen. But if you don't do anything, nothing will happen. You will just be in this regular, like, fucking plodding along. Disney Pixar have just released a new movie called Soul, and it's like, it's our podcast in a movie. It's fucking incredible. And like, I don't want, like, everyone go and watch it. I'm not going to spoil it, but like, literally, if you're listening to this podcast, you need to fucking watch this movie. It's everything that we try and teach in this podcast. And I don't want to turn into the big black monster with the wobbly arms. Like, that was what was happening. I was being like consumed with, you've got to do a proper, sensible, boring job. And that was not what I wanted to do. So I'd just go back and just go, yeah, fucking follow your dreams. Like, you're not always going to feel this shit. You're not always going to wonder what you could be. Like, you can do something.
Like, a lot of that goes to kind of, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think if we think about today, we have so much inspiration around us about things that we can go and do in the world, because we can just open Instagram and there's someone who is an expert at something and is now doing that for their full-time job. But yeah, growing up when there wasn't the internet, you could only really see what was around you. And I think yeah, it's so important to like to realize that if you're alive today and you've got the internet, you're so fortunate in the fact that you can see so many different things actually that you can actually go and do. Whereas, yeah, like when we were growing up, and I suppose most people listening to this growing up, there wasn't that out there to be like, okay, well, oh, I could go and become a professional graffiti artist, because that just wasn't a thing. Or even if it was a thing, you couldn't see it because there wasn't the means to actually go to show you that this is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I opened the Nike app yesterday, and there was fucking a whole piece on the Nike app about Start With Why, Simon Sinek. And I was just like, fuck, these conversations are going mainstream. Like,
yeah.
2 years ago, we were talking about Start With Why, and it was like a niche thing that no one had heard about. Now it's on the fucking Nike app. Like,
yeah,
I mean, I can't say no one had heard about it, but do you know what I mean? It wasn't being talked about in mainstream circles. Like, movies being made about finding your passion. Like, fuck. Like, that is going to empower a whole generation of new people who are going to come into this world with like hope and aspiration. And those are so fucking powerful. Like, I had nothing, like grey clouds and fucking like, you're never going to make it. That was the message.
Yeah.
That was the prevailing message. If you're not the elite few that are chosen and picked, and that takes the control away from you. Whereas now it's like, no, you, 100% you are the driver. And if you do a few things, like, things will come back to you, and like you don't have to be chosen. You can fucking make yourself be noticed. That's amazing.
Yeah,
man.
I think that's one really great thing that's come out of the whole wellness movement and industry and mindfulness that people have started talking about over the past few years. Well, it's obviously been talked about for a long time, but as that's gone mainstream, I think personal development is going a mainstream route as well. And people realize that they don't have to just follow a system that everyone else has done before. That it is so possible to actually take it upon yourself to learn these things, because everything that we know, everything that anyone you like and aspire to be like knows is out there. And I think so much of it is in books, which is like a brilliant tool. So much of it is on YouTube. Like, there's so many places now to go online and find ways to better yourself, to move to what you want to do in the future, or like find what you want to do in the future. Because it's something like, going back to what you were saying before, you couldn't just like think, oh, that's what I'm going to do in the future, unless it was a really obvious job that everyone around you could see in your day-to-day life. But yeah, I think just the potential now is amazing. And I feel like it'll be so interesting to see what happens over the next couple of generations, because I feel like we're at a bit of a turning point at the moment with people being like, actually, I can do something more interesting than what maybe I was kind of set out to do.
Yeah, 100%. It's really exciting.
Cool. So let's move this on slightly. We'll have a little fun round here. If you started a business today with only £1,000, what would that look like?
I love this question. It's so exciting. Like, with this, I'm presuming that all I have is £1,000. I don't have my flat. I don't have my internet connection. I don't have anything. So I would call around and find friends that I could sleep on their sofas. I know 100% that Jay would let me go and sleep in his studio.
Yeah.
So that would be my base, and then I would have no rent to worry about. I would buy paint with the £1,000, and then I would basically do what I've done since lockdown, which is create content for the internet, and I would sell paintings. I think so my career this last year, paint wise, has gone incredibly like under my own name for the first time ever, because everything before we'd done under the name of the company. And one of the interesting things was that when we started the company, we had to take every single job because we had to eat. And so in this scenario, it would probably be similar. But where I'm in the stage of currently is so counterintuitive. It's like I've said no to a couple of brands. I got contacted by a car brand. It doesn't fit with me. Big money, but it's I turned it down because it's not what I want to be doing. But interestingly, when you and so I've priced my canvases high, and the absolute temptation would be, if I've only got £1,000 to start with, would be to price my canvases affordably. But then I'd be trying to sell 10 canvases where I could just sell one canvas. And I think that this is, it's a big thing that comes down to pricing, and I think a lot of creatives get it wrong. It's like you have so much less struggle to sell one canvas to the right client who's willing to pay a decent amount for it. So my canvases currently are going for 1,500 to about £3,000, and it's like that client doesn't come around every day, but they come around enough to make it worthwhile.
Yeah,
you know. So it's like, because I don't want to just be painting 1,000 canvases a day to like pump them out in order to keep the lights on. So although that temptation would be there if I just started with £1,000, I would try and price my work high and find the high-end clients that are willing to pay for that. And then everything else would just be the same answer that you gave last week, in terms of like being in the places where those people are. And so currently, I think that's what I love about street art, is that like it's so accessible. It's every time I paint in the street, it's an advert for me, but also like it's a gift, and you don't have to buy my work. Like,
yeah.
And like I still think that like £2,000 is affordable. It's fucking expensive, but it is also affordable if you really, really want an original. Then like I've had people come to me who have saved their money for a long time in order to get one. And then I'm also doing prints, which is kind of like to free more people. But you can still just enjoy my work by going and seeing it for free. So I really like that whole like scale of like, you've got your patrons are supporting you, they're allowing you to keep making the work. By making the work, you are giving it out to free to most people, like building an audience, but at the same time you are able to survive and then keep sort of building along that road. So a lot of it is, I do feel like I did start from scratch this year. And I mean, I can go into that if you want me to sort of talk about that journey.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. Like, let's go into what that looked like, because a lot of people listening to this will be in a very similar scenario where their artists have been doing it for a certain amount of years and they'd like to turn that into a career. So what kind of blueprint could someone follow to be able to do that? So
at the beginning of this year, 45, who's just been a guest on the show, and another artist, Crooks, sat me down, and another artist, Eddie, were all kind of saying to me, you should be painting your own stuff more. Because I would paint like once every 6 months, once a year, like I would do something for myself, because everything for the past 10 years has just been around the business, around supporting our staff, around growing what we were growing. And beginning of this year, they sat me down, they were like, you need to do more stuff. And so I said, yeah, I'm going to. Okay. They kind of talked me into it and sort of made me feel bad for not doing it. They're like, you love this, you need to do it more. I was like, okay, cool. So I thought I was painting a lot more by producing like one painting a month. In February, I was painting on the roof of our studio, and the drum and bass DJ, legend, actor, TV presenter, whatever, Goldie, happened to be walking past and started shouting at me in the street. So I came down off the roof and had a chat with him, and he on the spot kind of bought 5 paintings from me to put up in his gallery in Thailand. So that was kind of a huge sort of, I guess, endorsement of, I'm creating a piece of art, and this legendary figure, like street artist as well, like one of the UK's first street artists, like painting work in Birmingham in the 80s, like thought my work was worthy, that he wanted 5 of my canvases in his gallery. So that was kind of a big, that reinforced everything that the other guys had said to me, that 45 was kind of banging on at me about, of like, you need to produce your own work. But obviously we're still running the business, only really had time to create 1 or 2 paintings a month. Then we got this beautiful gift of COVID-19, which like, and I remember sort of the very, very early days of thinking, I can't just sit at home all day. I will go out of my brain if I do that. And our studio is 10 minutes from my house. So I just plotted up on the roof and just started painting. And I have spent I've done 97 pieces since the beginning of the year. And if I'd counted that,
could you make that 100?
Well, dude, so I counted up for this interview because I was like, oh, that would be cool to drop in like how many paintings I've done, because I was like, I know it's a lot. I had no idea it would be that many. 97 is a fucking lot. And if I'd counted up earlier, then I would have squeezed in 3 more paintings to get up to 100 in a year. So that's my goal for next year, is to do 100 paintings. But yeah, I did 97 paintings, and I learned so much during that time through creating that work, through putting it out on the internet, grown this like huge following on Instagram, and I'm like so grateful for it.
And just to cut in there, how many hours does it take you to paint a piece on average?
Between 4 and 7 on average.
So I think that's an interesting, like, obviously going super mathsy with this, it's interesting to work out how much time this year you've put into it then. So say it was kind of, you've done almost 100, and then we say an average of 5 hours a piece. That's 500 hours you've put into painting and evolving this year. Fuck. I think if you're listening to this, it's really interesting to maybe like work out how many hours you've put in this year into your creative endeavor, because I think sometimes if you're just doing it for an hour here, an hour there, you kind of, it doesn't actually add up to as much as you think it does. Whereas actually, if you dedicate a certain amount of time to it consistently, those, like the fact you've made 97 and that's like, whoa, shit, that's actually a lot. It's kind of an interesting way to kind of just think about, okay, well, this is what I've done this year, and this is what someone else has done this year. How much have they achieved compared to how much have I achieved? And then balancing out and be like, actually, I've only put in 14 hours of work this year. So someone who's put in 500, of course, they're going to be further down the line.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has got their own unique story, and everyone's got their own problems and their own reasons / excuses, because they could be excuses, but for not being able to put in as much work. I mean, for me, I obviously had to, you have to sacrifice in order to put like that time in. You have to sacrifice certain things.
There are only so many hours in a day.
Exactly. So that means that Yonna and I now have Bay Day on a Sunday. Like, that's our day together, because it's like me and Yonna have gone from spending every single day together for the last 10 years working in the business, to now I'm off painting every single day and she's working on stuff at home. So we realized, okay, it's important. So we block off Sundays, and Sundays is a no-go. Like, there's no podcast recordings, there's no me painting, there's nothing on those days. It's just time for us to spend together. My sister was talking to me about like certain video games, and she was like, oh, you should really play this. And I was like, I don't have time to do that. Yeah. So there's been lots of things in, like, with COVID, I've not been able to see my family. I haven't. So that's wiped that time commitment out. It's like I don't have to go and see my mum or my grandma. It's like we do a Zoom call, which I can do from my kitchen table, which takes 15 minutes. Whereas it's like seeing them would be a day. I'd go home, I'd go to my grandma's, I'd see everyone. So that's wiped out. I've not seen my friends. So and like I would multitask. I've been ringing mates while I've been painting. I've just had my hands free, doing a mural, painting while chatting to my mates. So there's been I cut out all of the like junk food, and I just focused on, and then it comes back to a lot of it was within myself, of like of hard work, of like outworking everyone. I saw a post on someone's Instagram the other day saying like it was like a post of like the 3 walls that they painted this year, and they've like, oh, because of COVID I haven't been able to paint anything. And it's like, because of COVID I've managed to paint 97 pieces, motherfucker. Like, I've gone out and I've found boarded up shops, painted over the front of those. Like, the streets have been dead at certain times, so I've been getting up at 6 in the morning. At 6 in the morning, that's when my identity has to kick in. Because when I'm wrapped up in my cozy covers, the last thing I want to do is go and be outside. And like, there has to be like, there has to be something driving you, and that is my identity. It's like what I want to do. This is the thing, is like, I'm fucking lazy. Like, if I let myself have my own way, then I'm a lazy motherfucker and I'd lie in bed. That's what I want to do. Like, I want to do that more than I want to paint. But like, I have to build it in, like, no, you're hard, you're out working everyone. Like, get up, go and paint. And that kicks in, and then I get out of bed. And like, so when I'm walking around the streets at 6 a.m. during a lockdown, like, there's no one around, I can paint what I want. And it's like, that has been so energizing for me during this whole time. And like, I know so many people have had such negative experiences with this, and I fully understand it, and I'm really empathetic, and I'm like, I don't mean to sound like a dick, but I've had a fucking amazing time. Like, I've managed to create so much work, and I've managed to work really fucking hard, and that's been amazing.
I think one thing you touched on there was the Bay Day. I feel like that's such a lovely idea, and it's like what I've always kind of had that of being like, hey, this is work time, this is home time. How important do you think it has been to add that kind of like separation time for like, this is the time for this is the time for this?
I think Jonna and I have been together for like a decade, man. So it's like, we don't need to spend every minute with each other. We are like perfectly comfortable with our own time, and we both support each other's creativity and projects and whatever. And it's like, and we give each other space for that. But at the same time, like, if you don't nurture a relationship, then it will fall apart. And so that does take time. And it's like, yeah, I'll be painting for 5 hours, but there's 12 hours in a day. Like, we're still going to have dinner together, and we're still going to see each other. So I think, yeah, blocking off that time is really important. And I guess it comes down to self-discipline of they say, like, and it's something that creatives struggle with, is for us to have timetables, because we feel like that stifles our creativity. But really, you will produce so much more because I treated COVID like work, like I was going to work every single day.
Yeah.
Because if I treated it like this is my hobby and something I do for fun, then I would pick it up when I felt like it. And the difference was I picked it up even when I didn't feel like it. Because once I've actually got my paint bags out and I've found my wall, or I'm on top of the studio or whatever it might be, like, then I'm calling the gang. But
yeah.
But it's like, that's because I'm there and I start to get into flow and everything's cool. But it's that beforehand of when, if I'd not treated it like work, if I'd just said, I think I'll try and do some paintings over lockdown, it's like I would have done 6 paintings and I'd be moaning about it on Instagram. And I'd be moaning about it to 300 people. Like, I started this year with 300 followers on Instagram, and I'm ending it with nearly 50,000. So like that, do you know what I mean? That doesn't happen unless you're, I would definitely say I look at other accounts and I see that my growth is down to I'm producing regular content. And I look at other artist accounts that are producing like 1 painting a month or 1 every 2 weeks or something. And it's like, it's not enough for you to stay current in people's minds. And just as a caveat to that as well, obviously I don't measure everything on followers, but it is kind of an interesting metric to look at, and you can gauge that there's interest in your work when this happens. But
yeah,
I think it's important to note that in August I had 6,000 followers. So the explosion since then was through reels. Some of my reels got shared by Instagram, which just like blew my account. And one piece of content that I produced, there's one painting that if you looked at the views for all of my stuff, this one painting probably is 90% of the people that have seen my work have seen this one painting. Because sometimes you will just create a piece of content that just hits, it just resonates. That piece has will have been viewed tens of millions of times, because it's had 1.5 million views on my account, and it's been shared on gigantic accounts that I've had many more millions than I've had. So that reels thing, that was luck. It was also like right place, right time. But I was creating, like, I was viciously creating as much content as possible.
Yeah.
So I was in the right place at the right time. But my goal was 10k by the end of the year. And if I'd if we take out the reels, I probably would have got to 10K. Like that's kind of like the average that it would have worked out at. And I think that everyone says that growing on Instagram is impossible and it's dead and all of that. And it's like, no, I've done this for long enough. Like I have the right content. Like it is still possible. I grew in the last year. I grew to 50,000, luckily with reels, but it would have been 10K. And I think for any of our listeners, like getting to that 10K point is like, it's a really massive landmark that people should believe is possible, because I've fucking done it. It's like, do you know what I mean? It's like that was another thing that kind of fed into the COVID thing, is like, I talk about all of this stuff on the podcast every week. Like, yes, we've got our businesses that have been successful, that have been working on over the past 10 years, but let me prove it. Let me say to all of the listeners, like, I've fucking done this. So that means that you can.
Obviously you kind of had that big reel hit that kind of went completely viral. Like I remember being sat on my phone and like looking over at Lucy's phone and seeing your reel pop up on her phone, just like on the explore page or something. Amazing. Which was like mad. It's kind of like overhearing someone on the train talk about your work or something. With that one that went big, did you kind of then think, well, I'm going to try and make more things like this to kind of try and get that hit again once it had kind of worked well? And then also, what do you do to kind of keep stuff fresh? Because obviously you found this style that is working so well. What do you do to stop yourself getting bored of that?
The funny thing about the one that absolutely blew up is that halfway through painting it, I phoned Jonna, as I often do, and said, I think I'm just going to black this out. It's not going well. And she went, you're being an idiot as usual. Just carry on with it and it will work itself out, which it always does. And I listened to her and it did. But kind of mad that I nearly packed it in halfway through and just blacked it out and just didn't bother with it. Because I think you never, like, I didn't know that I had a smash hit on my hands. Like, you never know, which then goes to the, like, to being fucking voracious. It's like, I saw a tweet the other day that was saying, like, of the thousands of paintings that Van Gogh has done, 100 are well known. And it's like, there's something to be said for that. Like, I've done 97 pieces. It's like, some of those are going to hit, some of them aren't. And you never know which is going to hit. So I made a conscious decision not to try and replicate the painting that did really well. All of my stuff, like, fits within a similar sort of style, but the one that really blew up was the girl, like, kind of holding a ring light that I found a photograph and I messaged the photographer and I was like, I'd love to paint this. But I haven't replicated anything similar to that photo since, because I don't want to become a slave to the algorithm. I want to create the work that I want to create. Like, we do always need to remember Toby Shinobi's Venn diagram of doing something you love that intersects with what is commercially viable if you want to be a creative as a profession. Yeah. But I didn't want to get caught in a trap of just doing the same shit over and over again, because I think it would just be boring.
How important is it for you for your artwork to be accepted by other people rather than just making it for yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I painted my first neon piece in 2018 and then sat on the idea for 2 years, really. I did a couple of pieces in the meantime, and then a few more in January and February, and then like mental after that. Didn't think that it would be accepted because it's fucking neon pink. Like, I just did not think that would be as successful as it has been. Because that's fucking ridiculous. Like, I think I really liked it because I hate all the bullshit and bravado of the graffiti scene, and which I'm definitely distanced from. I would definitely probably class myself as a street artist now. But they overlap so much, and I think there's so much bullshit in that world that I was like, everyone's like trying to be like fucking cool and fucking macho and whatever, and I was just like, let's paint neon pink. It's fucking obnoxious, really. Like, it's so bright, like when you walk down the street, like, you cannot help but miss it. And I think that's one thing that I sort of brought from, like, without a doubt, I was a graffiti artist for 10 years, from 18 to 28 when we first started our business. But during that time, I definitely learnt stuff that I bring to my street art that probably other street artists don't, because they've not got a graffiti background. So one of those things is like just relentless repetition of like, you can't really miss my work in Shoreditch. Like, and I know that works because I know it from graffiti, and painting in neon pink is like, you're going to see my stuff. And you can't
so miss it, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was a sort of another thing that I brought from that. But, I thought that I would build a small following of people that were interested in what I was doing, like and I mean, in theory, I have, like, there's millions of people in the world, and a tiny percentage
comparatively,
of those, follow me. But it is actually exponentially bigger than I ever expected it to be. I mean, when I set my goal of getting 10k followers by the end of the year, that was fucking audacious, because I believe that you should set really ridiculous goals. And that was one of them. I was like 10k followers, because I knew that was really going to be hard, which sounds ridiculous now that I've smashed through it. But I honestly didn't think many people would like it, but I thought I'll make it for the ones that do, and that's all that I need. But it just turns out more people liked it than I expected, to the stage where I got contacted by Shaquille O'Neal's people that he really liked my work, and now Shaq has one of my paintings hanging in his house. Someone sent me a screen grab of a YouTube video that I think his kids have got a YouTube channel or something. Anyway, there's my painting in the background hanging in Shaq's house. It's just like, that is fucking incredible. So yeah, make work, put it out. Like, you may expect that people are not gonna like it, but like, you never fucking know. Like Shaq, like, mad.
That is mad. I literally can't believe that Shaq has your painting hanging in his house. Just absolutely mental.
Well, it's interesting, because when we were doing an intro, you were like, do you want to talk about the Shaq thing? And I was like, no, I would talk about the Shaq thing if it delivered value to the audience, but if we were talking about it in intro, it would have just been a brag. So here's where I would have talked about it. If I'd been DMing loads of celebrities and I emailed 500 people and Shaq got back, then I would be like, look, here's proof that you put it out, and whereas they found this flag like just by finding my Instagram, so I didn't have to put the effort in of contacting. But I only would have spoken about it in an intro if it delivered value. So I only would have said, this is how I got a celebrity to post a picture of them holding one of my paintings. But I didn't mention it because they got in contact with me. So that was what happened there.
What would you do if you couldn't paint outside?
I've thought about this, because luckily we have the roof on top of the studio, and when we were like lockdown, I was like, I don't want to be going outside and getting in people's way or whatever, like, because I don't want to unnecessarily spread the virus. So I was thinking, like, what if we have like a completely rainy summer or whatever? I'd just work on canvas. Like, I prefer painting outside because it has more energy. Certain spots where I know I have to be like quick to paint them is a real like experience that I enjoy. But but like, if not, I would paint on canvas, and I would find something to love about painting indoors.
And in terms of like getting that scene, what would you do to get that out there? Because obviously a lot of our listeners won't be mural artists, street artists, like used to being painting things that the public will see regularly. So what would you do to get stuff out into the public if you didn't have that as a medium?
So we had James Lewis on the show. He's got 1 million followers on Instagram. He just posts videos of his process, and I think when I was making my videos, he was someone that I was definitely looking to, and I learned a lot from, in terms of how I present my videos out to the world, which was just came through practicing and doing TikToks and just working out how to create the video, because I know how to create the artwork, but then how do I present the artwork to the world? So you've got to think, like, most people have not been out and about. Like, thousands more people would have seen my work in the streets if we'd not been during the middle of a pandemic. But where people have seen my work for the most part is online. So it really wouldn't make a difference. It's just I think people are impressed by the scale. of outside pieces. So I'd have to maybe work out something that I could do on canvas that would, it's all about capturing people's imagination at the end of the day. James Lewis, all you see is his paintbrush traveling along, and that is enough that it has inspired people. So work out what that is, and that just comes from relentlessly practicing and making lots and lots of work.
And you've kind of touched upon there about the videos that you make. Like, most of the way the world will see your work will be through the videos that you've created. What do you think makes a good video of art?
I never would have said this before, but process. I never would have posted videos of me like sketching up. I use a doodle grid system that seems to fascinate people. For me, it's so boring. I was always like, why would you want to look at a painting halfway through when it looks shit? Because it only looks good at the end. Like, that blew my mind. So process, people are fascinated by process. They want to see you starting from nothing and creating something from that. So just document what you do. People love it.
So obviously there's a perception change there between how you view videos and what makes a good video. One thing that my perception has definitely changed on is you. So when we first met 10 years ago, you were a very grumpy, miserable character, whereas now I would see you as completely the opposite. What do you think made that change, and how do you think that came about?
We've already discussed. I had 5 years of chronic fatigue syndrome under my belt, or ME, or whatever you might call it. I think I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, of everything that I'd been up to that point. I had all of that time of being lost, depressed, not knowing what I was going to do with my life, feeling like I should do something. My sister died in my arms, which had a obviously devastating impact. I lost a relationship that was like that kind of young love of like all consuming, like my beacon, my world, or whatever. I have like a much more comfortable love with Yona than I had in this relationship that was just like intense and crazy and shouty and like just us not understanding humans yet. And I'd lost that. One of my good friends died in a car wreck. So the decade before I met you was a very difficult decade, and I think I was cautious, which you have interpreted as grumpy, but and like, yeah, you're probably quite right. It probably does come across as grumpy, but I was very cautious of, like, I had so much loss around me, and also I had culture and people that I loved telling me that what we were doing was a bad idea. And so I really did want to prove everyone wrong. And we were starting off this business, and we were really putting ourselves out there. We're putting ourselves on the line. Like, we had no other options. It was like, make this work, or like, don't eat, or go and get boring jobs. And we all knew that we didn't want to go and get boring jobs. And so I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I think what changed was probably, to some degree, the success that we saw in a relatively short amount of time. Certainly after 3 years, things started to click into place, and we started to feel less mad, and we started to feel more like, no, we were right all along. We did have a good idea here. The crazy, crazy fucking insane thing about the human brain is that if you believe something, it's true.
Yeah.
How mental is that? Whatever you believe is true. So if you can believe, like, whatever you believe about yourself is true because you believe it to be true. So I wanted people to be happier around me than not around me. Like, I wanted them to be happy in my company. And so that just became a journey of, and that was being inspired by, particularly by members of staff that we've had over the years, who were like beautiful, happy people that I felt happy to be around them. And I just gradually started to remind myself of, instead of looking at everything that can go wrong in a situation, looking at everything that could go right. And I started saying, how is this the best thing that has ever happened? And trying to look at the positives, even in a negative situation. And that was just a mindset flip of working out the person that I wanted to be. And I think that we can all become the person that we want to be if we just actually do some thinking about it and actually craft that identity around yourself. And like, we nearly got in a row with Will Storr over it of like his kind of view, and like obviously the most respect in the world to Will Storr, but he really sort of believes that our characters are set. And I think there is scientific data around, like, I mean, I'm never going to be this kind of like, I'm never going to be not who I am. Do you know what I mean? But I feel like we have much more control than we're led to believe. And because Will Storr's whole thing was like, you're never going to be Beyonce, and you should stop trying to think that. And
yeah,
I think like you should aspire to be Beyonce, like, or your version of Beyonce, like whatever it is that success is to you. Craft your identity around that. And so that just came with becoming older, becoming more mature, not wanting to get my behavior like completely concrete and set and unable to change, wanting to be positive and happy. And I think so much of my joy recently has come from this podcast, like getting messages from people, like realizing that I can impact and change people's lives without them having to say anything, without them even, like, there's so many people that we know are successes through listening to this show that have never got in contact. And that's a really beautiful feeling of just knowing that the work we're creating, the content that we're creating, is changing people's lives. So I have a purpose now, and I have belief that we are doing the right thing in the world, and that makes me really happy. Whereas I didn't have any success when we started the business. I just had a vision of what could be. But now, because we know that everything that we do, we can make it work, it's like that comes with a certain degree of happiness and less trepidation and less fear of taking the step. Whereas back when you met me, I was filled with fear.
I feel like we've kind of come around full circle now, because it almost feels like maybe you actually haven't changed as a person, because back when you were in the bed, it was like you still believed that you could be something great. You just didn't know what that was, and you didn't know how to get there. You were kind of in this lost state. Whereas now you've got the confidence through experience of exactly what that looks like, and you now know how to set yourself up for something. So it's like whatever you wanted to do in the future, you know that if I can create the idea and have this vision of what I want to become, I now have the confidence to push through to get there. Whereas when you first started, you didn't have that. And I think that was very evident, especially at the start, in your kind of cautiousness, because I remember everything that we did, you would definitely have that, like, oh, I'm not sure, I don't want to do that because it might be a risk and I might lose everything. And that's fully understandable based on your past beforehand. But now I think if we were in that same situation and we couldn't afford something, you would be like, yeah, let's just go for it because I believe that we can do it.
Yeah, 100%. And that's just come from time and experience. And I hope that someone listening to this can take it from our experiences. And at the end of the day, that's what the show is about, is not having to worry too much yourself, because there are so many case studies of everyone else who has taken that leap, who did feel that fear, but jumped anyway, so that you can, because we didn't have that. And if we'd had that, we'd had tangible examples that we could look at, I would have felt less fear, because I would have seen it and I would have gone, well, they did it, we can do it.
So on the topic of having a vision, what do you see the future of Creative Rebels evolving as post-COVID?
I want to get better. I've noticed that I have this thing that Stormzy has, and I know, and it's mostly in interviews. I get ahead of myself.
An incredible rap talent.
Other than my incredible rap talent is I have this thing where my brain is working faster than my mouth, and sometimes I start asking a question to a guest that ends up with a completely different question. I do this like whole ramble fucking blah 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 blah, and it's me processing out loud, and I want to get better at that, and I want to get more eloquent at that. I think that we can help people live a more beautiful life. And that is fucking magic to me. I think that creatives are fucking heroes. I think it is fucking brave to be creative, and I want to instill that bravery in people. I want them to go, fuck yes, I can do this. That is so intoxicating for me. So the way I see it evolving is like, I want to do more access. I want to do more, more bringing the community together. I just want to grow it. I want to reach more people. Like, if you're listening to this, you can help us do that. You can share this with people. You can tell people about it. If you believe what we believe, that, I mean, we called this show Creative Rebels. Like, it shouldn't be rebellious to be creative. And I think it's, and with movies like Soul, it's going to become less rebellious, but it's still always going to be, there's always going to be people on your shoulder going, are you sure? Oh, I don't think that's a good idea. And like, fucking just live your life. Do not get held back by that bullshit. I want to spread that, and I want to help as many people as we can. And I think this show is good. I think it's fucking good, man. I think that if people listen to what we're really saying and what our guests are saying, and they really start to act, and they really start to work fucking hard and sacrifice and put the time in, they can create a beautiful life for themselves. And that sets me on fire, dude. So I just want to keep creating this show with you, and I want to grow it, and I want to travel the world with it. And I think all of these things are possible.
Thank you so much for this. This has been really fun, and I think we should definitely do more things like this in future, because it is just a great way to just go into each other's minds.
Yeah, I suppose it's it's a real deep dive intro, isn't it?
Yeah. Where can people find you online?
They can find me at David Speed UK on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram.
Boom. See ya.